The day I turned 27, I was jobless. 2 years ago, I graduated from Spain's most challenging course, architecture. 7 years of brutal training with 0 job prospects. But 2 weeks later, I was hired as a consultant at Deloitte, an industry I knew nothing about. 30 months after that, I was the youngest private equity real estate director in Spain. What changed wasn't my intelligence or my work ethic. What changed is that I killed the architecture identity and rebuilt it from scratch. And then I did it again and again and again. At some point, the consultant died and the investor was born. At some point, the investor died and the entrepreneur was born. At some point, the scrappy founder died and the CEO emerged. Each transition required demolishing who I was to become who I needed to be. And that's a pattern I've seen in every founder I've coached, every startup I've invested in, and every business I've built. The ones who scale the fastest are the ones who die also the fastest. Not literally, but psychologically. Because entrepreneurship isn't just about building a great business. It's about outgrowing yourself violently, repeatedly, and without hesitation. And I know you've been sold this idea that the key to business success is just learning a high-value skill and grinding hard until you succeed. That only gets you started. The key is learning to evolve faster than your business grows, killing outdated versions of yourself fast enough to stay relevant to reality. In other words, it's about forced adaptation. Because the market doesn't just test your product, it tests your very identity. Every entrepreneur wants to be successful, everybody wants to grow, but nobody wants to die. But in entrepreneurship, they're the same thing. You don't scale your business, you survive its evolution. And every different level of business requires a neurological and psychological death, rebirth cycle. You must unlearn what made you conquer the previous level. And most founders resist that. They cling to their ego, the operator, the hustler, the visionary, and that attachment becomes their ceiling. The difference between elite founders and everybody else isn't intelligence or grit, it's the speed and grace which they let their old self die. Let's define this clearly. I call ego death to the moment that your internal model of who I am no longer matches external reality. When you're forced to learn and to become something new in order to get to a new standard. Your ego's job is to maintain continuity, that you believe that you are a specific type of person who does things in a specific type of way. But entrepreneurship job is to destroy continuity in the name of innovation and progress and growth. So every time those two collide, you feel pain. But that pain isn't failure, it's the metabolic cost of evolution. Every identity theft at the core requires rewiring your brain in a new direction, especially those networks that are responsible for decision making and self-modeling. Every time, for instance, that you fail at something or you face hard feedback, your brain fires a signal called prediction error. That basically means that your map of reality no longer matches reality. And that signal is the biological trigger of neuroplasticity. It is your brain realizing it needs to rewire itself to stay relevant. So ego death is a neurobiological renewal. It's the brain rewiring itself, which means that you don't change your mind. You literally remodel your brain to handle a new truth. And this is not a philosophical construct. It literally is a neurological reality. And you will notice this every time the strategy that once worked stopped working, and you need to reassess what needs to be done next. And that moment in which you realize that the old playbook does not work anymore and you're forced to answer the call for personal evolution is the crucible in which your success is predicated. Because in that crucible, reality will be asking you, are you ready to evolve or are you going to calcify? How you answer that question will yield the next outcome. But turns out that ego death is not necessarily pleasant. Most founders, in fact, resist it because their neural models ossify around old success patterns. They don't want to evolve. It's like the operator who scaled to 7 figures by doing everything himself and now he can't stop doing everything himself. Or the CEO who mistakes loyalty for competence and he has people around that should have been fired 2 years ago, but he still clings to them. They both mistake consistency for integrity and they hurt their business. They don't see that the same identity that built the company is now strangling it. But those who succeed, and I've seen it hundreds of times, they see it differently. They embrace ego death. They treat their identity like code, constantly refactoring, never sacred. They reconfigure as fast as markets shift because to them, reinvention isn't betrayal, it's maintenance. That's why a 25-year-old can outperform a 45-year-old veteran, not because of energy, but because of neuroflexibility. The 25-year-old hasn't accumulated enough identity to defend. So when the market shifts or a new offer appears, they shift. But the 45-year-old has a decade or two of "this is who I am" calcified into every decision. When the market shifts, they justify their old approach until no longer does. This is also why I admire Richard Branson so much. He has been able to reinvent himself in hundreds of industries, always seeking the next stage of growth, always pushing his own models of reality further. That is the sign of an elite founder, someone who can consistently stay relevant and dangerous at each step of the way in as many journeys as he dares to enter. In other words, ego death really is a measure of your adaptive capacity. The faster you dissolve outdated ego structures, the quicker you metabolize new reality, the longer you can stay relevant. And in business evolution, the speed of self-death equals the speed of adaptation. The rigid founders literally can't bend, but the fluid founders bend, so they can consistently build the next thing. And this is such a profound truth that nonetheless most people never access. Because most people think that they need a better strategy, better funnels, better ops. They don't. They mostly need better neuroplasticity. Because it's not the market that is taking them away, it's their resistance to internal evolution. Every plateau they hit isn't proof of their limits. It's proof of their identity lag, the fact that they need to update their brain. For instance, in business, your first hire must kill the "I do everything best" identity. You must now become a person who trusts imperfect execution. Your first 100K profit kills the scrappy hustler. Now you can't close every deal personally, and you need to build systems that sell without you. Your first 1 million must kill the generalist founder identity. It must empower you to get specialists that know domains better than you so that you can manage them. In other words, at every step of the way, your business will outgrow who you are. And it feels like dying, but that also means that you're winning. And this is why I built Selfmastered. I started this business because I saw founders that I was investing in that were making unnecessary mistakes, that were not able to handle the evolution their business required them to handle. They were making mistakes that were preventable. In other words, they did not want to evolve. This is why I decided to build Selfmastered, to help them and you start optimizing what you already have and start transforming yourself into who you need to be with a proven system that is guaranteed to reward who you are. Because evolution is not a choice, but the speed of your rebirth actually is. And the founders who died the fastest rise the highest. If you want our help to decode the sources of friction keeping you stuck and get a personalized roadmap that you can start implementing today for faster personal evolution, track with data, not promises, book a call with us. See you in the next video.